Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Your Brain Shift podcast. I'm Keith Engelhardt, and I'm here with co-host Kevin McKinnon. He's back with us. Good to see him joining us after a little bit of a reprieve. Our focus today is culture and its influence on success, health, and wellness, and fulfillment. Today's session is the first overview in a series on the topic of culture. Look for other in-depth explorations on future Your Brain Shift podcasts. And I thought I'd start with a brief definition of what culture is. According to Webster Dictionary, definition of culture is the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. That's kind of a broad summary, and most of us will relate to, we have cultures that have different art forms, et cetera, dress differently, et cetera. But worldwide and even locally, we have a continuum of cultures. Our family of origin culture, racial and ethnic cultures, workplace cultures, societal and national cultures, even provincial and state or regional cultures, and each one of those are a container that molds us and makes us. There's cultures of inclusion, there are cultures of exclusion, there are cultures of empowerment, there's cultures of oppression, cultures that unite us or cultures that divide us. There are cultures based on common language. There's cultures that are based on religion and politics. All these cultures evolve, some more slowly than others. And the reason culture is important to our success, our health, wellness, and life fulfillment is cultures at every level are environments. And according to Marshall Goldsmith, the author of What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and his book Triggers, that these environments not only are situational, and most people go through life unaware how those environments and cultures shape our behavior, our actions, or influence our health, wellness, achievement, success, or life fulfillment. Environments are important because they can shape us more than we shape ourselves and more than we shape them. Our environments are relentless triggers for how we behave and respond to the world. And he asserts that if we don't create and control our own environment, our environment controls and creates us, and often as a result turns us into someone that we don't even recognize. So that's a brave world to explore, but we're going to give it a shot here in this show and subsequent shows. So Kevin, tell me how you perceive culture and your upbringing and how that had an influence on life and your worldviews.
Okay. Kevin was raised as a Pentecostal. Culturally, or if you want to say religiously, I was raised a Pentecostal. If you ask me today, after all these many years, I would be a child of God. Period. That's it. Okay. Culturally, I grew up mixed because I'm part Indian, I'm part black, and I'm part white. So, therefore, I have 3 different cultures in my life, and all 3 of those aspects of my life or who I am are in balance. That's just who I am. So I had 3 different cultures that I had to follow, but as I gotten older, each step of the way, okay, I looked at culturally, I was in a small town, everybody's Pentecostals, and we're all going to believe this way. And I was perfectly happy with that as a kid, as a child. But now, as I got older, I went in the Navy and I got out into the world. Funny thing happened. The aspect culturally, me being a Pentecostal, went away. Not my love for God, but the fact that culturally, I didn't need to be sitting around in one dot on this earth, believing like everybody else believed. But yet, when I left, I found out, well, culturally, there's many different cultures, there's many different beliefs. And as I went through, traveled around the world and went to different countries, my mind expanded is what happened. I started to, for instance, when I went to Africa, that was a whole different cultural aspect. I'm a black man going to Africa for the first time, and check this out. They had no respect for me. They didn't like me. They told me that I was a guy without a culture and without a country. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I was born in the United States. So that was kind of a cultural aspect. Then I come back and I'm raising my own kids, and culturally I end up, here we go again, I end up back in a small town raising my kids back into the same culture that I originally left from. Not that I came back to that culture, but when I came back, because I like living in small towns, that culture had not changed and adapt, but I had. Mm-hmm. You follow me what I'm saying? So,
absolutely. There's a mismatch there. Yeah.
Right. So culturally, if we look at, let's just stick with the small towns, and it goes back to culturally, a belief system. And if you get caught in a belief system and you're not able to leave and find out any different, then it seems to me that people should want to expand their minds. You know, if culturally you lived in a rural situation and all you've known is a rural situation, but the world is changing every day, color, whatever, religion, all that, monetary, everything changes. And if you've got, I found that these people have a small town mentality, but it only goes beyond the county, and it needs to go beyond. So small town Kev, I go out into the world, I hit about 8 or 9 countries, and I come back home, and within your family unit, you try to describe to them what you've experienced, what you've seen, what you've dealt with, what you've had to change in your life to adapt to those situations. Dude, sometimes I found that it's expanding for some, but for the most, they don't have that understanding. Their mindset is still on this particular dot in the world, when there's so much of the world out there that can expand their minds on so many. Put it this way, culturally, if you like food, oh my God. Oh my God. If you like food, God, culturally, you can start traveling around and eating all the good food, and then you'll find, oh, there's more to life than fried chicken. Yes, there is. Yeah. You know, that same mentality applies to the small town, unless you're willing to expand your mind. And if you've sat there and you've had a belief system in your head, my question would be, is it working for you? Has it worked for you this year? Yeah. Maybe you don't want to do that next year because this year didn't work. Even in this pandemic. Okay, at the beginning of the year, you knew we were going to be in a pandemic. People's going to be buying all the food and everything up. You might want to go load up the refrigerator and the deep freeze. Most people didn't. They just sat there and went fake news.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're sharing those experience about travel and then bumping into other cultures, other environments, other ways of seeing, other ways of doing. It reminds me a little bit of my own upbringing. What wasn't involved in travel related to the military, but my family moved around a lot. I counted the number of places we lived in from my birth to age, till I graduated from high school, and it was something like 12 different places or in that neck of the woods. And so we were moving it like every year and a half almost, or in that under every 2 years anyway. And every town was a little different, even though, and I even grew up in a different country and culture as well, different environment. I was born in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and experienced a lot of different things at an early age. At the time, I hated it because we were constantly moving. You had to make new friends, learn new things. Some were small towns, some were larger towns, whatever. Learning, what the customs and culture were of each one, and then the big paradigm shift was at age 14. My parents immigrated to the States and to the southern states, to North Carolina. And that was a major transplant and cultural shift completely. Some of the polarities and racism things that were going on in the late 60s were totally foreign to me. But to your point, when we move outside our local environment, regional environment, or even national environment, and bump into other cultures and environments, there's a potential for cross-pollination and learning. There's some exciting ways to do things differently, or at minimum foods to explore, as you shared, that aren't within everybody's experience, and are often how we adapt to those or explore those are tied to the local or family of origin culture environment we grew up in. Do we have a fixed mindset versus one that's open and exploratory and allow us to evolve? And it's to Marshall Goldsmith's point is those environments mold and shape us in ways that we don't really think about and explore. Are they working for us, to your point, or are they getting in our way? To the theme of his book, What Got Me Here, maybe won't get me there where I want to be when it comes to success, health and wellness, or fulfillment in life. So there's a lot that can bubble up, and a lot to explore when it comes to culture and how it influences. And as you mentioned, is it working for me?
Right, because in today's society, it astounds me that just where we live, most of the United States is rural, and it's that rural mindset that astounds me because culturally, like you said, people move around, they meet different people, they meet different cultures, but yet and still, they never seem to ask themselves when they go into a new town or go into a new city, it doesn't change, because if culturally like you said, you went from Canada to North Carolina. Trust me, that was a big cultural jump from Canada to South Carolina. But now, within the United States, cultural jumps are literally people running from down south up north because they're running from this particular culture down here that isn't really serving them well. Okay, but here's the thing that has always boggled my mind. If you're leaving from down south because you don't like the racial tensions and you don't like the way that you had to live and you didn't like the mindset, okay, amen. We move up north, but what do you bring? You bring that old mindset, you bring those old ways with you, and there's no really change or really adapting going on. You're just saying that I'm moving from this cultural experience up here into this cultural experience, but you're bringing all the bad experiences that you've fallen on, and it's always been that way, but yet you're bringing those same negative cultural experiences into a whole nother, culture, because you haven't adapted.
And there may be clashes, there may be harmony. It really depends on what those differences are. And it's kind of human nature. I know that brain science now knows why we get stuck in patterns of behavior or perception based on all the cultures that influence us, whether it's family of origin, neighborhood, etc. Because cultures can vary by where you are in a city, whether you're in the hood or on the other end of town, and so forth. Economic status is another way that culture and environments influence it. So it's perfectly normal, because back to the brain science point, our brains hate change. They like to stay with patterns that are familiar, and most of us have absorbed and often unconsciously, especially during the early years of our child development from birth to age 7, we're unconsciously picking up all those, for lack of a better word, rules or behaviors of the culture or environment around us. And often we're not taught to question or expand those horizons. I interviewed a guy, or was interviewed by a guy the other day for his podcast, and he was sharing that he grew up in rural Virginia. And I forget what the activating event was, the shift was. He spent some time in a more larger metropolitan urban area and around people that had more education and more economic opportunity than he did. So it was a contrast between, a poor rural family versus someone that was one that was more affluent. And that was what was most striking to him, was the values and the culture was completely different from between the two. And he learned from those differences. Quite often we turn those differences into polarities and a conflict, which is unfortunate, because no one environment, no one culture has all the answers to everything. We can learn from each other.
Right. But within that, what I found to be the biggest problem is that when you're dealing with culture, you have to respect the next man's customs and beliefs.
Yep.
Okay. And that seems to be one of the biggest obstacles culturally that is keeping people from adapting. Because here in the United States at one time, I remember everybody was against Muslims. And I'm like, okay, I asked the question, culturally, are you against Muslims because they're Muslims, or do you not like Muslims because you was told to not like Muslims? But yet every Sunday school in the United States since the beginning of time has said that you must respect someone's customs and beliefs. Sam in rural Virginia and Ahmad in Saudi Arabia have very, very stringent cultural differences, but if you put them two together in a room, they have to they should respect one's customs and beliefs, and if they do, have the mindset that I respect this guy for what he believes. I don't particularly believe like that, but what can I learn from this individual? Because all of it ain't going to be for me, but there's something learned culturally from them.
At minimum, what's the common ground? What do we have in
right.
common? One is food. And then even you could drill that down even further. Every culture has some form of bread. It might be a flat bread. It might be a loaf of bread. And there's a lot of different varieties that you can. So you can literally connect and begin to understand differences and opportunities.
A whole lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
Because men and women on this earth, you know, if cultural always has boggled my mind, because, okay, we have all kinds of cultures, but check us out. We're still on one ship floating through space.
Yeah.
And there's limited resources on this ship as we go through space. So now, are we busy being peacocks? Who has the best feathers? Look at me. Yeah, no, look at my feathers. No, my spread's better than your spread. But yet, all of us are on the same ship floating through space. And it's like, you know, we all got to get along, because no matter what, we're on the same bubble. This is the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite yogis that I follow has that similar insight, only he paints it on a progressive scale, that I'm a speck in my own neighborhood, I'm a speck in my own city, and that's a speck on the planet, and the planet's a speck in the universe. Yet I get sometimes puffed up like a peacock, displaying my feathers or being combative about something that's a little different, and is an opportunity to learn from, rather than build walls around.
Cultural experiences. And here's a thing that amazes me. From a country that was founded on immigration. This whole country, it's the immigration. It's all culturally immigrated, but yet still it's not, because all the cultures came here back then. We had the Statue of Liberty, but now all the cultures that came into the United States, one culture overrides all the other cultures, you know, and that's the part that people have to understand.
Yeah, we're not quite the melting pot that maybe we started with in the early foundations of this country.
And check this out. People's mindsets, for the most part, in the United States are 50 years behind. Because 50 years ago, but now when you come 50 years forward, and we go, and this boggles my mind again, with all the fast-paced computers, TVs, cell phones, you name it, we got it. Ziploc it, Zoom, let's do it. We got all these fast-paced things going on, but people's mindsets, while we have all this technology, the mindset is most of the people can't use the technology. Some of them can't afford the technology, and then culturally, they're scared of the technology.
Well, that's always been there through human history.
Right.
The gadgets we develop or the technology we develop are always moving faster than our culture or social environments and institutions. I think it's kind of a little bit innate to the human condition. And then the other thing is it's one of the strongest influences is family of origin culture. One of the stories I often share to illustrate that is my wife, until she retired, taught in education in university programs, teaching educators, specifically early childhood educators. And she always tried to get people to move a little bit out of their comfort zones when it came to culture and understanding different cultures. So one of the class assignments was always they had to agree amongst themselves. Everybody in every culture has food. So as a class group, you decide what ethnic cuisine we're going to explore, go out to a restaurant, whether it be Chinese, Indian, Mexican, whatever. You guys decide, but it has to be one that you've never explored before. So the class decided they're going to go to an Indian restaurant. And the group arrived, and as they approached the door to go in there, one individual just tonally panicked. She had a panic attack. She was just fearful of going inside because in her family of origin, what she was culturally taught was other people's foods aren't safe, that it wasn't even safe or to eat at friends or other people you knew. Everything else, there was that very rigid boundary tied to safety. So they coached her and nudged her a little bit. They said, well, just go inside. You don't have to order or eat anything. All restaurants have, soft drinks. You can, just sit and have a soft drink or a beverage of your choice while the other explore that. She was comfortable with it, went inside and sat down. She didn't order. Everybody else, picked something from the menu, and they decided to eat sort of family style, which is often the case in cultures other than our own, where they share, different foods that people have either prepared or ordered in a restaurant if they went out to eat. And somebody suggested, well, try the bread. There's this wonderful Indian flatbread called naan, and because every culture has a bread, and you're familiar with bread, it's not going to be some strange, spicing of, curry or something that you're not used to. So she tried the bread and just fell in love with it. Before long, she's eating off of everybody else's plate, so to speak, sampling all the stuff. But it's illustrative of how we have these unconscious mindsets, these patterns that are of perception that our brains have formed around something that's different than what we maybe grew up with, and how powerful that environment is in driving and modeling or forming our behavior, and it may not be serving us at every level of life.
That's the part that boggles me about different cultures and adaptability is that, hey, your example there, once she tried the bread, she was like, oh, that tastes real good. And then she started trying the different foods and she was like, whoa, this is really good. So she with the help of her friends, she learned a new culture. She experienced that culture and found out that all her fears and maybe different beliefs were false. That was just a thought in my mind. But now that I've gotten out here and tried this, oh my, I like Indian food. Same thing applies to me when I went over in Singapore, and here's a guy that's allergic to seafood, and all I saw over there was seafood and vegetables and rice. So I thought, oh God, my ship is sunk because I'm allergic to seafood. And come to find out, take the seafood out, I had a blast eating the vegetables and the rice dishes and all the other dishes. Take the seafood out of it, I had a blast, dude. It was like you said, it was like something, it was different. The people were different. I mean, it was, it was just totally different to me. And to where if I had the money, I would love to travel around the world, because here's one thing that stood out in my mind traveling. I went to Spain, and I'm an architect type of guy. I look at buildings differently. I look at the way they're made, the way they're structured. And I fell in love with church buildings in Spain, because you look at these big, massive buildings and they have the big buttresses out there and you're going, wow, that's great. And then culturally, you ask the question, well, what did it take to build something like that? Then you find out that some of those churches, it took several hundred years, because all the families in the community were having kids, and the kids that was the workforce. They were sending everyone worked for the building of this.
And it was a generational project. Most of those Gothic cathedrals took multiple generations and craftsmen from multiple generations to build, and we benefit from the cross-pollination and those cultures bumping into each other. The mathematics that we use today came from Arabic cultures. The concept of the number 0 came from the Indian culture. The curved arch underneath bridges that hold things up came from the Romans, because they figured out that the weights distribute across the arch, and you can bear more load and go over longer distance across a river.
And they were moving water over mountains.
So our progress in a lot of technologies, knowledge, and understanding comes from cultures bumping. Unfortunately, we have this characteristic as humans to form a lot of tribalism around culture, and that's where all the conflict and barriers come into play, and rigid mindsets and thinking.
Yes, because I never did. I mean, we could culturally, if you just think about, and we'll go back just for a piece of history. If you go back, say, 50 years before the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, just those 50 years, what was going on in Europe at the time, to where Europe was this big bucket of cultural things going on, but yet you had a certain sect of people decide, well, we're going over here and we're going to bring our culture over here. And okay, but when they landed over here, their culture slapped right into the middle of the Indian culture.
Right.
And the Indians were here, and you're coming to the Indian land saying, we're culturally, we're going to do this. That's still happening today.
Right.
If you think about it.
All those mindsets of imposing our culture are my perceptions on other populations has been kind of a repeat theme throughout human history, and often not for the better.
Okay.
So it's important to understand that what we might perceive as an absolute. It is not. It's just a model or environment. I think probably the right term is a paradigm of understanding.
Okay, let's stop right there. That paradigm of understanding there. Okay, now that would fall back to, I would attach to that then, if we just go with just the total paradigm of understanding, which should bring, if you have a mindset like that, that should at least bring peace and understanding. Mm-hmm. That little bit should bring enough peace and understanding for you at least to look and see, or like I like to use the analogy, at least take your toe and put it in the water and see if what the water's like. You know?
Yeah, you might like it.
Right. But that's not being done. Culturally, people have become more stringent in their thinking, and then instead of more lax, then let me see what these other cultures or these other any culture can bring to me. They throw up a wall, but yet they throw up a wall. This sect will throw up a wall and go, no, we ain't going for that. But yet they're sitting on the other side of the fence, looking at all other cultures have fun and play and eat food and have a good time. But you're still sitting over here going, no. That's just strange. It's always been this way over here, but I know. And then so now you're fighting change. You don't want to change. Okay. You're fighting yourself because you don't want to learn and adapt someone else's culture, which for the most part, every culture on this earth has some very good aspects to it that one would want to adapt and bring into their own lives, because it would bring peace, it would bring prosperity, and it would bring joy.
Right.
But yet, those people, the other people sit on the side of the fence where all this cultural things and good things are going on, and they're still sitting there going, nah, I'm not doing that. And I'll use my family as an analogy. I have family down in Southern Ohio. I'm 60 years old, and just think in your mind what was going on 60 years ago, and I can take you down there now. Mindset has not changed. The religion down there has not changed. People's mindset has not changed. And culturally, this is a weird thing, but culturally and educationally, all they sit around and watch is reality TV shows. Now, we know it's a reality TV show, but now...
and there's not much reality, or a lot of it is scripted. Yeah.
Right. Now, listen to what I'm saying, but in my family's mind, or in that sect of my family's mind, that's for real. Yeah. That's what's happening out of the world. Now, here's the thing. None of them down there has ever left that part of Ohio.
Yeah.
Ever. They've not went on vacations. The furthest that they've made was an hour and a half away up into Columbus. They culturally could not handle it, and they all ran back down to the hills.
Yeah, that's that container concept that I was sharing earlier. Yeah. If we just stay in those containers, then it really does eliminate or limit our evolution and our growth, and also our potential of whether we do achieve the life success, the fulfillment, or the things that we dream or aspire to. An important element of that is to step out of our comfort zone and explore.
Right. Now, for some reason, exploration culturally and just from a understanding of other people has been, what would be a good word to use that against that? Suppressed.
Right.
I mean, I don't understand why all this, like here in the United States, we have certain suppressions. And here's the thing. If we just go back 50 years and we go, okay, let's look at everything that happened between now and then, obviously we already know what didn't work in our lives. We already know what culturally did not work. And we know religiously, we know socially, we know economically, but still they run back to those same mindsets that didn't work for them.
Well, it worked for a few. Ann Wilson Schaaf was one of the early feminist writers in the 80s and 90s. She's got a wonderful book called Women's Reality, and she's addressing the cultural or paradigm differences between males and females in our country. Specifically, she I think quite accurately pointed out that even though we have these small little differences throughout, but as a nation, we're still driven by what she called the white male paradigm. And she identified 4 myths that are sort of archetypes that unconsciously drive all our actions and behaviors. One is that paradigm, that white male system, is superior to all others. And the second myth is no other system exists. The third myth is that it knows and understands everything. And the fourth myth is that it's possibly logical and rational at all times. Now, if you look at those, there's some dramatic disconnects there. For the first one is being superior to all other systems. Well, how can that be when your second myth is no other system exists? How can it be superior to anything if you don't acknowledge that there's another way of doing things, and another cultural way of doing things, or another systemic way of doing things? So that was very insightful, at least for me, because it got to looking at how many different levels that's in play, whether it be economics, politics, how many different ethnic or, from her perspective, male and female differences and contributions have been eliminated because you have a system that's set up to not, first of all, recognize them, has oppressed other races and the female sex for how long? When this country was founded, white male landowners were the one that set the rules.
Right.
And had all
now
the political
today,
and economic power.
Yeah. Right. Now today, all that you've described, okay, those rules don't apply today because those same landowners have lost the land, and now corporations, are pretty much
have become the new. Well, land was just a outcome and emblematic of economic and political power. And to your point, that has shifted. It's the corporations and those cultures that have, kind of replaced it over time.
Right now. And now that we found that they've been replaced, now culturally, imagine those people with their mindset when they wake up one day and they realize, damn, we've been replaced. I mean, if on a small level, small towns, rural towns, they grew all the food. You can go down into these towns and there would be Quaker Oaks, General Mills, all the big grain factories. They built factories down in these little towns and these
close to the farm, so there was easier processing. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And because of that, most of those kids, because that money was flowing, most of those rural kids here where we live, just remember all those rural kids became lawyers and doctors and all those people of mindset. They didn't stay on the farm because farming wasn't profitable. So the smart ones sent their kids out to get better educations because this farming thing might not work out too well. So you might want to go out and get an education so you can still support your family and do this and that. But now today, culturally, a man could go out and get a job, have 4 or 5 kids, and send all 4 or 5 kids to college on one job. That life no longer exists anymore.
Yeah. Economically, things have dramatically shifted. Yeah.
Right now, if one doesn't have, one would say our school district, and I'm not talking about mine, but just in general, culturally, we say our school district is culturally teaching our kids to be the best and the greatest. But then what is that value based upon? Being the best and the greatest? Because if you take a rural town and you take out of that rural town the hundreds of kids that are in that town, and you just take out the 20 that's going to be successful, they're going to be doctors, lawyers, dentists, governors, people of such nature, but the rest of them are not. They did not change their thinking. And as a result, culturally, we have, and I used to hate hearing this, but we have a bunch of uneducated white men that are mad at everyone else, but yet culturally, you got all the blessings. Nothing stopped you from going to the best schools or having the best this or that, because that was, hey, if you want this, go get it. But yet the ones that are uneducated, that have been working in the factories and have now lost those factory jobs, they're not saying that, oh, that's my fault. They're blaming it on everybody else, but yet no one told you to stop living. You know, you're supposed to be learning things every day, not get stuck.
Well, that one for me is seated in culture. If I grew up in a family of origin where that wasn't valued, education wasn't valued, everything else. And to your point about there's different measures of success. We tend to culturally see success tied to achievement in education, achievement in of wealth, achievement with whatever. There's other measures of success. I could be just as successful being an artist and a craftsman or whatever. That's a whole nother rabbit path to go down. But I get your point, because actually that paradigm shift of declining population in rural areas dates back to the late 1800s, because in the late 1800s, just slightly over 50% of the population lived out in the country, small towns or rural on farms. And it was the Industrial Revolution that shifted things. People saw that they could maybe obtain a better life economically by going to the city where there was more options for jobs and potentially learning and education and so forth. And that's where we had this more mass migration to larger city urban areas. And sometimes the technologies that were developed in those early days influenced the migration even further. Prior to the invention of refrigeration, for example, you didn't have dense populations in the South because it was damn hot. It was miserably hot, and so forth. And when we first figured out how to store and transfer ice that we harvested during the winter, stored in ice houses so that we could ship it to southern areas and everything else, and then eventually when Carrier invented air conditioning, where you could air condition. For example, Phoenix, Arizona was a small town of 800 some people. You could say that also of Atlanta and major cities now. But when we learned how to air condition and stuff, there was this mass migration back to some of those areas of the country that weren't populated before. And the fascinating layer there is that was one of the biggest contributors to the Electoral College shift of some of the political power back out to rural southern areas and so forth. So the point being is there's this constant evolving environment and container that impacts us at our lives at all kinds of levels. And one of the keys to our own success, health, and well-being and life fulfillment is a recognition of those cultures, those environments, those containers, and choosing which ones work for us.
Right, because see, take here in the United States. Okay, here's a cultural problem that we're getting ready to run into. Okay, if you split the United States down the middle, on the east side of the United States, that's where most of the growing, and maybe a little to the left side of that line, heading over into Iowa and those states there. But that's where culturally and environmentally there's going to be a clash, because now look at states like Nevada, Arizona, that whole region down in there, they're running out of water. Now they have their own culture. We're talking about Nevada. They're still rolling on basically a mentality of cowboys and Indians. Culturally, that's where they're at. But now religiously, all that religion and all that culture, now all those states are running out of water, and they'll be out of water soon. Now, when those people, like you said, they're going to have to migrate out where they have better futures and better everything else. Problem is that they're going to bring 300 years of mindset into that, and they're going to demand
that's potentially a problem. It depends on how fixed those mindsets are and how willing they are to evolve and adapt.
Okay, but wait a minute. We know, we already know today how those mindsets are, because they project those mindset every day.
That bubbles up at a lot of different social levels.
Yeah.
I was just trying to say, rather than demonize those, it's just a more of a compassion understanding that we all suffer from the same paralysis when it comes to impediments to us evolving or understanding differences in cultures that we're better served.
Okay. But then the question, wait a minute, the question would be asked then is how come, if that's true, if you have all the benefits of being successful, right, but yet you just sit on the porch and have a beer and you're just watching the world go by, but yet you have all the blessings to advance culturally and educationally and economically, but yet you don't, and you'd rather sit there and blame the miseries that you're not supposed to have, because what's keeping you from going to get them is the big question. I ask people that all the time. Okay, if that's true and that's your thinking, then then we should not have a bunch of uneducated people in the United States. If that was truly the case, everybody wants greatness, everybody wants prosperity, they want peace, but yet out of 100% of the people, only 20-30% actually go get it. The rest of them just lay back and go, it's their fault that I can't have it. Yeah. So culturally and from a mindset point of view, that's what people are beginning to respond to. And then what we thought was people having an identity has been a false identity. It's not their identity. So you're dealing with a lot of things there.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
So
been the human dilemma, I think, throughout human history. It is the mindset development of I think Gandhi summed it up beautifully. And I'm probably paraphrasing it. Hopefully it's accurate, but be the change that you want to see in the world. That we have, one of the conditions of the human experience is we want the outside world to expand, to change to our perception or perceived model or container of what it should be, rather than the internal exploration and changing internally. And that's one of the paradoxes of any spiritual discipline. It is when we change the inside, the outside changes.
Right.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think this would probably be a good spot to shut this part of the program down.
Yeah.
It's been good.
And plant the seeds for exploration on all those other rabbit paths. Yeah.
Because on our next program, we actually are going to have to, now that we've explained cultural differences and what people should be looking for. Okay, now we got to help them in our next broadcast. We got to help them bring wellness, health, wellness, and peace into this. Now we got to start. Okay, we know what the problems of the stresses are. Now let's start dealing with how to deal with some of those stresses. You know, do they really does someone else's stress really apply to me? And if it does, why?
Yeah.
Is it something that really doesn't need to happen, or am I not adapting to it? And then the next question would have to be somewhere in that: why are we not adapting as people?
How are we being triggered by our environment that necessarily isn't me? Marshall Goldsmith has a wonderful example. Is I might be a peaceful, calm person, but as soon as I step into that culture and environment, I'm stuck on 5 lanes of traffic on a busy freeway. Is I can really easily pick up. Be triggered by that and respond in ways that I wouldn't even dream of doing in my own home with my family or whatever, or treating a waiter abusively and complaining about a meal that they didn't cook, they just delivered, and in my high chair beating my spoon because I didn't get what I expected,
right?
Because that culture environment of a expensive restaurant and what it cost me is triggering my mindset of privilege and triggering me in behaving ways that I normally wouldn't interact with people and levels I would normally wouldn't interact or people with. So the key point, I think the learning and discovery point that I'd like to share is be aware of your cultures at whatever level and how they influence you, and try and mold those or choose the ones that serve you for success, health, wellness, and fulfillment. And we might have another guest lined up for next event, but we'll definitely be continuing exploring the nuances of all this and culture at so many levels, because we're all in that sea
Yeah.
of culture.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of eddies and currents that buffet us in ways that
Yeah. Yeah.
most of us aren't aware of. So,
So we're gonna. So on the and on the next show, we're bringing in the chats because now it's time to bring in the people.
yeah, let's
Bring in
see
the
if we
other
can
group.
get some people engaged and
Yeah,
added
because
to the
Keith,
conversation.
because just this hour has been great.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stay right where we are and just bring in the people and start talking because this is good, dude.
Yeah.
That, you know, you and I got this. We need to bring in some more so we can start. We can bring in more and more knowledge and give people more and more choices.
Yeah.
More people involved, the more choices for wellness, peace, and prosperity.
And that's the bottom line. The more we get exposed
Yeah.
to, the more we experience, the more choices we have, and then more importantly, the conscious choices rather than just unconscious that we're, you know, mirroring what our environment offers.
What we're doing is that we're uplifting good consciousness. And that's the consciousness that we are conscious about. And the biggest fight is through all of this and add all of it together: family, social, cultural, religion, education, health, and wellness. We have to teach them how to deal with the unconscious side, the things that they do unconsciously, you know, like someone says, oh, I don't cuss until I stub my toe. Then it's God damn it. You know what I'm saying? Now that was an unconscious move. Now I'm the guy that don't cuss, and I'm not talking about me. You know, I'm a sailor. But I'm just saying I'm the guy. I'm walking around here, you know, rolling. I don't cuss. I got it going on, stump my foot, and then all kinds of goddams and MFs comes out.
Well, even that one is cultural, because culturally, most of us are taught that certain expression of certain feelings that we characterize as negative aren't socially acceptable. Yet anger or frustration, if we stub our toe or whatever the trigger might be, are normal human experiences and responses. It's the characterization of them, and then more importantly, the words and containers around them that either are perceived as appropriate or inappropriate, and they're just words. They're arbitrary containers that supposedly communicate that anger or frustration. That's a whole nother tangent. So I'll invite.
Anyway, we had it was a good show. Yeah. I enjoyed this, dude. We're gonna roll this. I'm excited about getting more people into it now because I knew once this started we was gonna roll, because Keith, good God, there are so many things involved with just what we talked about. We didn't get to them all.
Yeah, so I'll invite everybody to go back and catch the previous podcasts with our guests and join us going forward.
Yes.
We'll be working on putting together maybe a live interactive session where people can, at minimum, join through communicating with questions in the chat, or if we can pull it off, have people pop in and out of the conversation with the video layer. But whichever way that works out, starting a dialogue and conversation about the differences in culture and those containers that we create, and more importantly, to circle back to Marshall Goldsmith's point, is ask ourselves, did what got me here work effectively, and more importantly, will it get me where I want to be?